Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Today we're going to talk about 10 artists with really only one stellar album in their discography. Of course, this is purely subjective. This isn't a ranking, so we're just going to pick out 10 random albums from the past 4 or 5 decades. And here we go. So first one on my list, or just first one in general, is the first Moby Grape album. Self-titled, came out in June 1967. An absolute definition of a perfect record. Every song is fantastic. And it clocks in about 30 minutes, only 30 minutes long. The playing is stellar. The harmonies, there's 5-part harmonies. Heavily lauded, this album, when it came out, and the group had a bidding war before they were signed. So Moby Grape was definitely the shit back in the day in 1967 back in San Francisco. So they released this album back in June 67, and unbelievably, the record company released 10 singles from this album. 10 singles. What were they thinking? Who was the head of the promotional department at that time? Incredible, right? So that kind of damaged the record because they didn't know what single to play out of those 10. I've never heard such an absurd thing in my life. So that kind of broke up the band a little bit in terms of just, you know, commercialism, that kind of thing. It did reach the top 25, I believe, back in 67, but fantastic album. I've heard other albums by Moby Grape after this, like Wow, Grape Jam, and Truly Fine Citizen, but they just do not stack up to this record. This is an absolute gem of a record, and I think really, honestly, it's really the greatest album in their discography, and a must for any album collection. The first Moby Grape album. And let me just tell you about a few phenomenal songs on here. We got 805, just a great ballad. We've got Fall on Me. We've got Hey Grandma. We've got Indifference, which ends the album. It's just an incredible little jam. But yeah, no like particular real like long jams on this album. It's all about the songs. The songs are key. So anyway, this is one of them. Moby Grape, 1967. Let's fast forward to 1993. Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville, a really, really phenomenal record for the early 90s. So this is like a double record. I've only had the CD version, but I picked up her second album, Whip Smart, and I could not find a single hook or anything that drew me into that record. Whereas this album here has just hooks galore. Yes, her singing's a little off-key, but that's the charm. It also has just a wide range of material, really great ballads, kind of experimental stuff, like Explain It to Me, some rockers like Never Said, Fucking Run. But I just never thought anything after this album was truly phenomenal. So I'm just putting this up as her grand statement. And while we're talking about Liz Phair, I saw her early November. Flew out to a friend's house in Phoenix. We drove out to Tucson and saw Liz Phair perform this entire album at the Rialto in Tucson. And I had no expectations. I just went along, and it was just an absolute phenomenal show. Some of these songs even sounded better live. She was in fine form vocally. The backup band was stellar. It was just an amazing show. I came out of that show just going, wow, that was amazing. So yeah, Liz Phair. I did pick up this, after Whip Smart came out, there was this EP called Juvenilia. And I think it had 1 or 2 songs from Whip Smart, but the rest of the songs were demos from 1991. And those are really interesting, really bizarre, kind of demented demos that she recorded. But I never really found anything other than Exile in Guyville, anything better than this album in her discography. So that is one from 1993. Let's move on to an obvious choice here from 1977, Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. An absolute milestone in punk rock, one of the greatest albums of 1977. But early in 78, as they toured the States, they pretty much imploded, and they never made another album. And their whole legend is based on this record here, Nevermind the Bollocks. They did come out with the Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which was a movie, kind of a compilation album, but they never ever did release another album. And this is where the Sex Pistols legend lies. in just this one album. This is it. Never Mind the Bollocks. You really can't beat God Save the Queen. It's one of the greatest punk songs of all time. EMI, Anarchy in the UK. I even love Submission. It's kind of a little different than the other songs. Has kind of a reggae feel, but yeah, phenomenal album. And this is really the only album in the Sex Pistols discography that is worth owning, in my opinion, unless you maybe go for a bootleg of live stuff. But this is it. Moving on to 1994, Jeff Buckley's debut album, Grace. This is an amazing album. The son of folk legend Tim Buckley from the 1960s. This album came out heavily highly acclaimed. His vocal prowess on this is unbelievable. The guy was an absolute true talent. And right in the middle of recording this album here, the second album, Sketches from My Sweetheart the Drunk, he drowned in the Mississippi River. An absolute loss. This album has a few good songs on it, but it definitely doesn't have the consistency of Grace. This is a truly phenomenal record. Songs like So Real, Hallelujah, Corpus Christi song. It just really shows off the wide range of his talent vocally and just song-wise. The guy could really just sing anything, and it was a real tragic loss to lose Jeff Buckley in 1997. This guy could have went on to make just amazing albums. Just really, really, really sad. But again, like I said, this was recorded, before he drowned, and some things put together after the incident. But it just doesn't hold up to the first album. There's a great version, though, of Back in New York City by the Genesis on here. I think my favorite song on here is Everybody Here Wants You, which is great, second track. So yeah, I say Grace, unfortunately, is the really, really only stellar piece of Jeff Buckley you need in your collection, unless you can find some of the live videos that were around in the late 90s. Those are really, really great too as well. Let's move on to 1969, the first Flying Burrito Brothers album, the Gilded Palace of Sin. This is another just perfect album featuring Graham Parsons, Chris Hillman, Christine's Tune, Sin City, Do Right Woman, Dark End of the Street, Hot Burrito #1 and Hot Burrito #2, Hippie Boy, Wheels, Juanita. Should I say any more? This is a perfect record. I tried to get into the second album, Burrito Deluxe, but it just doesn't hold up like the first. And I never really had any interest once Graham Parsons left the band in the other incarnations of the Flying Burrito Brothers. I mean, it's decent stuff, but it doesn't really hold up to this album. This is the definitive Flying Burritos Brothers album and the most stellar album in their collection. From 1969, The Gilded Palace of Sin, Flying Burrito Brothers. Let's move on to an album that was recorded in 71, 72, not released till 1976. That is the debut of the Modern Lovers. The only album that came out with this lineup, Jerry Harrison, Ernie Brooks, Jonathan Richman, and David Robinson. Of course, Jerry Harrison would go on to the Talking Heads. This is another just stellar, perfect album, and the only album they did with this lineup. After this lineup, Jonathan Richman kind of turned to kind of childlike whimsy and kind of more naive type pop songwriting, which I love. I love a Don Little Snowman in the Market and a lot of those songs off the compilation album from Buckley that Rhino released. Like, what were some of those songs? You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, this is a completely different Modern Lovers than the Jonathan Richman and Modern Lovers that were formed after this. This is the only album they put out, the only really true album they put out, but an absolute perfect album. Pablo Picasso, I'm Straight, Dignified and Old, She Cracked, Hospital, Girlfriend, Government Center, Roadrunner. It's an absolute perfect record, and this is the only one they put out with this lineup. Stellar. Let's move on to 1970, the solo debut from Emmett Rhodes, formerly of the Merry-Go-Round. This is nearly a perfect record. All instruments played by Emmett Rhodes. Just incredible. Though sometimes the drums do sound like he's banging on boxes. So I don't know if he was recording on a 4-track or an 8-track at this point, but With My Face on the Floor, She's Such a Beauty, Lullaby, Fresh as a Daisy, You Should Be Ashamed. I mean, just really amazing songs. Emmett playing all the material. And I love that first Merry-Go-Round album, but I never really heard anything after this album by Emmett Rhodes that I truly loved. I tried getting into this album here, Mirror, but it just doesn't even compare to the first album, the debut. So that's another one, another example of a stellar record. One stellar record in his discography of an artist, Emmett Rhodes, 1970. Let's move on to 1990, first album by the Sundays. This is a great kind of chimey, kind of Smith-sounding record. Of course, it has the hit, Here's Where the Story Ends, just a great pop hit. But there's other just phenomenal songs on here. Hideous Towns, You're Not the Only One I Know is such an incredible song. The whole album is just, it just flows from beginning to end. Skin and Bones, I Won, ends with Joy. My Finest Hour is just gorgeous. But they put out 3 albums, but none of them really compared to this album. Their second album, Blind, had a couple of decent songs. They had a little bit of airplay with Wild Horses, the Rolling Stones song. And there's one really great track on here, Blood on My Hands. This came out in 92, I believe. But it just doesn't compare to this. This is their definitive album. Really great if you haven't heard it all the way through. It has way more to offer than just the hit single, Here's Where the Story Ends. So great, great album from 1990 from the Sundays. Let's move on to 1970. The only album they ever put out, Thunderclap, Newman, Hollywood Dream. That hit on here, the hit on here is, what is it? I should know that by heart. Something in the Air. Huge hit. Tom Petty covered it as well. But the whole album is just loaded with just gems. Look Around, Open the Door, Homer. Great, really unknown Bob Dylan song that was part of the bootleg series. Or the basement tape, should I say. When I Think, Wild Country is great. Led by Speedy King. And we've got Jimmy McCulloch, later of Wings fame, on guitar. Just a really, really stellar album. I love the song The Reason, but they never put out another album. This was just a one-off. Speedy King put out a couple of solo albums after this that didn't really go anywhere, but this is a fantastic one-off. Thunderclap, Newman, Hollywood Dream is the album from 1970. And then last but not least, I'm just featuring 10 artists, 10 albums here in this list. We have the debut from the Stone Roses from 1989, a stellar, perfect record. They're almost kind of like the bridge between the Smiths and Oasis, and kind of started the whole Britpop thing early on, 1989. You got I Want to Be Adored, just an amazing array of songs. Waterfall, Bye Bye Bad Man. And then it ends with Fool's Gold, which is like 11-minute, kind of funky, kind of rave up. And after this album, a few years went by, maybe 3-4 years went by, they came out with an album called Second Coming. And it just didn't have the magic of this. And they only really put out 2 albums. And this is the one to have, the really one stellar record to have from their collection. So anyway, that's my list. Please add to the list. I know there's a ton of groups out there that only released one great album. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.